Imagine if you have your vision as the car with the right team. Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years, 6, 3 months.
This morning is all about leadership and influence.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to it. It is officially Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. And of course, we are continuing with our series, very controversial series. For the past couple of episodes, you have been watching it live every single Wednesday morning. And the interaction in the comment section has been crazy. And of course, today it will be no different. So please do jump in on the comment section. Please do hit the share button. Also like and subscribe to continue following our conversations. And of course, we got an amazing guest in studio with us today, and we're interested in actually going deep into this conversation. It can become controversial, like these conversations always do. But and of course, I got my co-host, Mr. Larry Varrie. What's happening, my brother?
Thank you, Zakes. Good morning, viewers. I'm excited to delve into this conversation. I think we haven't really engaged this perspective when it comes to the land issue, when it comes to the current dispensation that we are living in, the so-called democratic South Africa. So I'm excited to delve into this conversation. Pieter, over to you.
Thank you very much, first and foremost, for having me on the Inside Show. I appreciate you inviting me. And let's have this be a blunt and controversial, but also an insightful show.
So thanks, Pieter. Thank you for coming through, and thank you for accepting the invitation. And so, we want to get into this conversation. I'm going to hand over to Larry to take us into, usher us into the conversation. Let's go.
No, thank you. Look, like I said earlier, we want to really delve into the new so-called democratic dispensation, and what it means, especially to people that are born in this democratic dispensation, especially from a white perspective, or so-called white. We don't really believe in racial classifications because it was part of the apartheid agenda is to divide people by the way they look. But in any event, I would like to start the conversation by asking you what your view of democratic South Africa is as a white person, so-called white person that is born in the new dispensation. What do you define this democratic dispensation as?
Sorry. Before you answer that, Pieter, I wanted to check with you, right? And just so the audience knows that actually Pieter is quite controversial as it comes to his conversations that he has on his TikTok page and his platform. He gets a lot of views and a lot of interaction and a lot of conversation that gets started because of his views, and because before the show started, we just touched base a little bit, and he was saying he thought he was just speaking the truth, but turns out it's actually controversial. And so that's part of the reason we want to get into this conversation with you this morning, to just hear your thoughts and your ideas, and then I guess you can jump in by answering Larry's question.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I grew up in the new South Africa. I had the opportunity of going to school with people that are not just white people, and I think that largely shaped the person that I've become. I saw things for what it was and not what white people taught us it was, whether true or false, right? I had the opportunity to first-hand experience the new South Africa, which I think a lot of older generations didn't have the opportunity, to experience. And I think the new South Africa and all of South Africa having the opportunity to grow and learn and debate and dialogue together, that gives us the opportunity to learn more from different cultures and to empathize with other people and to just come to the same conclusion that we're all human, we are going to make mistakes, we're going to hurt each other, but at the end of the day, we need to have these discussions and we need to fight in order to succeed.
I feel like, Larry, your question was a little bit deep, but I want to kind of work towards, I want to build towards that, the point that you're getting to there. But I want to ask Pieter, if you came obviously from a white, I guess Afrikaans house background, right? But then were you raised in a Were you raised in a racist environment? Were you raised in like, black people do this, don't speak to black people, or don't do this?
I've always said that I was never raised in a racist household, but I was raised in a stereotypical household. So you can't go into the townships because the townships
It's
are dangerous. Don't become friends with black people because one day that black friend's uncle, he's going to attack us in the Swart Gevaar. You know what the Swart Gevaar is? It's been an ideology for 30, 40 years.
Is it still a thing though?
I think it's still a thing.
Okay.
It's too large. It's become it's decreased in size, but your fundamental conservative families still teach this to their children. So no, I wasn't raised in a racist household, but I was raised in a stereotypical Afrikaans household of, we do this, black people do this. We still come from Europe, black people still come from Africa. So we do things different. We're meant to live in democracy, but we have our terms and our conditions. And that's where I really broke out of, the norm, because I've always wanted to be different. I don't like following the line, because that's usually where the fault is.
And in terms of school, what was your experience now? Because at school you actually mixed with, there's black kids, there's brown kids, Indian kids maybe, that do Afrikaans. I'm assuming you went to an Afrikaans school.
Yeah, it was an Afrikaans conservative school. Not a lot of black kids.
What school did you go to?
We're folk school.
Where are you from originally?
Heidelberg.
Heidelberg, okay.
Yeah, so pretty conservative school. They always had something to say either about my hair or about my views.
Why about your hair though?
Either too long or too something. So that tells you it's conservative. And there was interactions with. I always had more interactions because I was in debate and I was historically grounded, and I had these conversations. I was always the kid they didn't invite to a braai because I had the political discussions, and everyone was like, "Let's talk about
you
rugby,
mess up the braai,
or let's do you mess up the braai." But in school you always had those interactions where you had racism in a conservative school, and I always stood up against it. And I did lose friends because of that, So yeah.
And then tell me, in terms of the view, more general view that maybe you share, and the constituency that you come from, or the Afrikaner community that you come from, that they share with brown people, so-called brown people or colored people, however you choose to, or however you know these people or label them. What is your experience or your relationship that you share with those people?
With black people, with
brown
colored people.
Yes.
So I've not had much interaction with colored people. I had a few colored friends in high school in playing rugby together, but that was really a small minority group of people. As we know that colored people are actually a minority in this country. So I had more interaction with black people. So I don't know if that answers your question,
well,
but I've always thought that it was important that we move away from distinct distinctions. I don't like the term colored people. I don't like the term brown people. I like humanity. I like humans. But if we have to term it, I usually talk about dark-pigmented people, and light pigmented people.
Yeah.
So I see colored people and black people as very much of the same people. That's why I believe that we need to have these communities stand together. Otherwise, it's divided.
The reason that I'm asking the question is basically there's always been this idea that colored people, so-called colored people, are half white, semi-white, and have always been put into a particular space where you're not good enough to be black, you're not black enough to be black, you're not white enough to be white. So when you even go to school, we even share a similar language, Afrikaans. You understand what I'm saying? So in terms of that is where I was basically asking the question, how you engage with a so-called colored person as opposed to a black person. And I know you've mentioned that you see them as the same group, which I also, to a certain extent, I do believe it's the same group of people, although we have differences in language, culture, whatever the case may be. But we all are in modern South Africa called black people. But my question was more focused on, in terms of where how these people are seen. How do you see them as someone that you share the same language? Do you see similarities between you and them?
And to be honest with you,
Do you see them as black people?
I
you
think
said.
to a large extent, historically, white people has played a large role in trying to dominate colored, brown culture. Trying to dominate, we originated as the people of Afrikaans, even though now we know that's not true. Because we know that people in Cape Town, especially your Arabic people, were some of the first people to write Afrikaans and speak Afrikaans. So I think to a large extent, Western civilization, especially the Europeans that came here as colonizers, we have tried to overtake this colored narrative, the brown narrative, because, like you say, there might be white genetics played into it. But I think that's absolutely wrong. I think we need to move away from it, and we need to have the colored community be their own voice. I'm not here to sit and tell you what it is to be colored, what the struggle is about or anything. We need the colored community to shine out and to be their own voice in South Africa, because, once again, and I'll say this live like I've always said it, colored people are the indigenous people. Khoisan people are the indigenous people of South Africa. And there's no exceptions. We have to bring them into the discussion, whether we like it or not. It's their right.
More than South Africa, you can stretch it to most of SADC. You can go up to Namibia. You find, in fact, a lot of the Nama, Khoisan, some of those communities are still alive in Namibia, Botswana, and it's just sad how the history played itself out. With everything that ended up happening. But be that as it may, let's continue.
Yeah. Look, I think I want to also take the conversation a bit further. But before I do that, look, I do agree with what you're saying in terms of we are distinct people. And in our distinction between us and other black communities, I do think, we need to acknowledge our differences, but it shouldn't be something that divides us. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm happy you share that. It comes from a different view, a person of different culture who's also articulating or saying the same thing that we are saying, that the colored people come from the Khoisan people. Do you understand what I'm saying? Something that some people acknowledge, some people don't, some people want to hear it, some people don't want to hear it. But it's also good for people to hear that, this is not something that people are beginning to make up because they want a particular thing or there's a particular agenda with, this, what we call, we are not coloreds, we are the owners of South Africa. But in terms of the next question, where I wanted to go, I've seen on your TikTok that you had, or you did a podcast or a story on Nelson Mandela and Khoisan, which they both symbolize two different things in South Africa, especially in politics, or the liberation movement. Mandela being someone that was part of the Western agenda, and Khoisan was someone that was not part of that agenda. And Khoisan being more radical about land and transformation, economic transformation, as opposed to just reconciliation. So maybe you want to take us in a bit more into that. Do you believe that Khoisan was removed precisely because of that, the difference between him and Mandela, and that they needed, that the white minority of apartheid needed to push someone like Nelson Mandela?
See, I think at the end of the day, Nelson Mandela was a better face, he was a better spokesperson for the ANC, for South Africa, to display to the world. Right, Khoisan, like you say, even though he was more radical, he was more transformative, he would have brought real economic liberation, whereas Nelson Mandela was someone who brought political freedom to the people, right? Whereas most South Africans today still lack participation in real economic, participation. So, Khoisan, I think, I can't go into why he was assassinated and all of that, but definitely, I think to a large extent, if he became the leader of the ANC and he led instead of Mandela, we would have seen a radically different South Africa today. Unimaginable, right? Not in terms of, Zimbabwe. People like using Zimbabwe as an example to why we shouldn't do land reform and why we should excuse that idea. But people forget that Zimbabwe doesn't have the legal framework South Africa does, and it's not as constitutionally grounded. but yeah, I think Chris Hani, at the end of the day, was the revolutionary, whereas Mandela was the leader they needed to lead.
If you were a betting man, would you say Chris Hani's assassination was an inside job?
I think there was people in the ANC that probably knew about it, but it was very coincidental, right? You had Chris Hani, Nelson Mandela, Steve Biko, all of these large figures who were great people, and Nelson Mandela, who was great in speaking and resonating with the people, he didn't really bring that radical fire that people wanted, right? It worked back then, but today people are like, maybe we should have gone with the more radical option and we shouldn't have just settled.
What do you think? Do you think we need a Chris Hani of today to transform where South Africa is right now? Do you think that the Mandela project, in terms of not addressing the real issues of land and economic transformation, in that sense that the Mandela project failed, and that we actually do need some radical transformation that speaks to land, that speaks to economic transformation in South Africa?
Absolutely, yeah. So what I think Mandela and all of these leaders did a great job in bringing people together in the reconciliation movement after apartheid. But what they did was they had killers walk free, and people who had family members killed never served justice. So that was one flaw. I've always criticized Nelson Mandela for the TRC movements. It wasn't right. It didn't bring justice to victims. I think if Hani became president, you would have seen radical economic transform and land transform and things like that. Nelson Mandela just couldn't do that because he had to still, appease the Western world.
And then, in terms of there are other figures. We know we were having a discussion earlier on the other figures that are not really mentioned in heroes of the
South
liberation
African
movement, which are so-called brown people. Right, Ellen Busak. What is your knowledge? Have you ever heard of Ellen
I've heard
Busak?
of him. I've heard that he was a anti-apartheid activist. I know about Kriel.
Ashley Kriel.
I know about.
Maybe it's your family.
Well, you know what? We've actually did DNA inquiry, and it turns out that Kriel actually largely has Khoisan family. So. Like I said earlier, my family is a little bit stereotypical. They believe that, once genetics mix, you might not be able to go back. But that is certainly not true. It's been demonstrated in science that, even though I might have a brown skin today, one of my forefathers might have had a light skin or a brown skin, So yeah, maybe I'm related to Ashley. But yeah, I don't know.
Now I want to ask a question about you reacted to Jordan Peterson's interview with Ernest Route, right? Or Route. What's your thought process around that? Because I know Ernest is pushing this whole agenda with the Afro Forum thing and the fact that white people are being slaughtered on their farms and all that kind of thing. What's your thoughts around that?
So I've never resonated with believing that white people are being slaughtered. I believe in logic, reason. I see myself as a leftist, and I think that leftists has always been the people of reason and logic. Even though some people
used to be.
Oh, used to. Yeah, let's say used to. I actually made a video about that.
Yeah, used to be.
So, yeah, no.
But what's your thoughts about the whole Afro Forum and the fact that they?
It's sad that you have to create a whole new narrative just to be relevant in modern politics, right? What I've done, I've based my whole TikTok career, right? I've been doing this for about a year, and I've always said that, I'll be speaking fact and I'll be speaking the truth, even though it might be controversial. But what Afro Forum and Solidariteit have done, and they've done good projects, I'll give it to them. They've had good education initiatives, even though limited to certain races. They've done good things, but what they're doing now, especially with media from the United States like Jordan Peterson, and I
Tucker
saw Ben
Carlson,
Shapiro,
mm.
who the apartheid government, had a close relationship with with the apartheid state of Israel. So that's just very coincidental. But yeah, I think it's a publicity stunt, mostly. There's no real...
Do you think it has some sort of muscle, though? I think it does, because that's why Trump is bringing all these, these tariffs and all this
To
kind
South
of thing
Africa.
to South Africa, yeah.
Yeah.
Based on that.
So, yeah, well, I don't like that argument, because Trump imposed tariffs on every country around the world, not just on South Africa. So unless you have EFF radicals in China and in Vietnam, I don't see that argument working, because Trump imposed tariffs as a spite to the whole world. So Trump doesn't care about South Africa. He doesn't care about white people. He cares about creating the narrative that he does for political gain. And that's my view. I've never liked what Trump is doing. And I don't even think Trump could point to South Africa on a global map.
I
Or
don't
spell
think so,
Afrikaans. Or Boere. For that matter.
Oh, Buddha.
So, yeah.
So before you ask this next question, I was going to piggyback on that exact point. I was just thinking around the lines of, do you think it's going to backfire on America, everything that's going on now? Because it seems to be
I
backfiring.
think so. So there's in political theory, there's always been this idea that empires and superpowers last for around 100 to 150 years. And when you look at the decline of the United States since 2016, since Trump took office the first time, this is becoming a reality. The United States is in its worst decline since probably Barack Obama, and the new superpower will not be Russia, it will be China.
It will definitely be China, I agree. What were you going to say, bro?
No, I wanted to ask you now, in terms of privilege, what do you define as white privilege? What do you think white privilege is?
A lot of people define white privilege as inheriting a 5 million rand house from the crimes against humanity during apartheid, and your parents might have benefited through that. And I agree that that is one example. But another example of white privilege I like to use is a mental privilege. We were taught from a young age, right? I'm talking about white South Africans on a large scale, especially during apartheid. We were taught that we were superior, that we knew better, that we were God's chosen race. So we have that type of mental superiority, privilege built into our head. And that is why it's important to deconstruct from that notion. And, I left culture and a lot of things at the age of 14, indoctrinations and so forth. And I've deconstructed, and that is why I believe that a lot of white South Africans, you can't just say, I believe in democracy and I'm not racist. You have to deconstruct, because if you believe that, for example, that you have the right to sit on this bench just because you're white, that's wrong, and you have to deconstruct from that. That's one example. But yeah.
Have you found on the same point that black people and brown people and Indian people also suffer from the same mental block as the way they look at white people?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you why. So I've spoken religiously about why I believe that especially large denominations of Christianity and Islam has really hindered the progress of especially black South Africans, because it puts people, especially people in poverty and disadvantaged people, in this mentality that whilst you're praying, you're waiting for better days, but your child has to starve whilst you're praying and waiting for better days. So I've been controversial about that. I believe that religion, whilst good in many approaches, can hinder human progress, because at the end of the day, it makes us sit like this and wait for something to happen, instead of humans going and creating some kind of meaning. Right?
Yeah, you're saying that you understand white privilege not just as money, having inherited money, but if we talk about land, networks, social credibility, a whole range of things that was naturally inherited by the white population, so-called white population. what do you think? Do you think? Let me make the question a bit more personal. People that like yourself now, you're a white person. You come from a white family. Your family or your grandparents and so forth has had wealth. Let's call it wealth, right? And if you talk about justice, because I've seen you you advocate for justice, would you then say that the same things that has been inherited, like your family, for example, now, the stuff that they've accrued over time, which was stolen or derives from stolen property, what is your form of justice when you consider things like that? When you talk, when there are conversations like compensation, expropriation without compensation, and that could mean anything. It doesn't just refer to land; it refers to anything that you can define as property. So if you talk about your family, for example, now I'm using them as an example, do you feel that if we talk about justice, that these are things that must be handed back to people? What would you describe as justice in the sense that you've inherited things from the past, if it is that you agree?
So I think when it comes to redistribution and wealth policy, a lot of people really have not gone into what this type of Marxist communist philosophy is all about. It's not about taking a person's one-bedroom flat or taking their house and redistributing it to 5 disadvantaged people of color. That's not really what it's about. What it's about is colonizers have come to Africa and they've taken away the means of production for Africans and colored people to create means of wealth. So what we've done is we've taken large factories and diamond mines and the means of production, and we've placed it in the hands of consolidated means of white capital. And that is what the means of production is, and that is what needs to be redistributed. Nobody is...
vineyards there in...
and the large farms that is being...
Nice vineyards there in Cape Town. Stellenbosch and all
especially unused land, all of these land that sits and builds wealth because there's minerals and stuff under the ground and fertile land. It sits there, it's not being used. It's being consolidated in white capital, so it grows wealth and it can be passed down to the next generations. That's what I'm against. I'm not against people losing their houses because they have to fix the injustices of the past. But they can contribute to the right means by giving the people who own the land the means to produce their own wealth.
What about banks and things like that? These are institutions that have been there before the new dispensation, what we call the new dispensation. Then in terms of banks or businesses, corporates, mining companies, even land, do you think that white people should return things like that to specific people? I mean, when I say specific people, I mean the community, or do they have to return it to government or not return it at all? Or should people, what the white campaign outside is that take the existing land that is not being used and leave us with the stuff because we are protected by property laws. First deal with those things, then we can have a conversation about the other stuff. So, yeah.
So, like I said, what we need to do is we need to redistribute the means of production. So when we look at, let's use an example for a large diamond factory. Let's say the top 5% of the owners of that company are white. What we need, or the 50 or 60%, what we need to do is we need to redistribute who makes the decisions in that company so that it is consolidated not just under those people but under all of South Africa. We need to redistribute wealth so that all people can benefit from it and not just people running it. So an example, a person working in a pencil factory, he makes 1,000 pencils a day and gets paid $100 for his work. But the person selling those pencils, the owner of the factory, makes 50 or 100 million rand a day, but only pays that worker 100 rand. And that's where we say that's wrong. You need to give the people working their larger ownership of what they're producing. We need to put collective ownership on everything. And to answer your question, in the hands of the people or the government, that's a good question. The end goal of communist utopia is that there's no government. But I do believe that those types of leftist ideologies, communism has become outdated in 2025. I'm still a Marxist. I believe that redistribution and so forth is needed, but we need to rethink it because Otherwise, like people use, for example, we'll see Zimbabwe refold, because South Africa is just as corrupt as Zimbabwe was 30 years ago now. It's just being,
Because you can't also say that. And here's the thing: if you say we go the Zimbabwean route, where you're saying, alright, okay, all these farmers, the whole Stellenbosch, we're giving it back to, a group of people that just come in, and so then they get in. I think we had this conversation the week before and last week and the week before, where it's a matter of, okay, you want the land, go ahead, take it. Okay, there's 10,000 chickens here, there's 15,000 cows, and 20,000 sheep, go ahead. But now I don't have the infrastructure I don't have the trucks to take those cows to get, to be processed, to be taken to Checkers and Pick and Pay and Woolworths and all these things, because that infrastructure is what gets. So those 20,000 cows mean nothing on the grass there in the veld. They mean where they make the money is where it's like where the trucks come there, 20 trucks come there, they load all those cows and they get distributed across the country. And then next thing, my phone rings and there's a message there that says 15 million, 20 million, 30 million, 50 million rand is in the account for all those, for my produce. But now if you just say, come here and just take it, I'm happy I have it, but now what do I do with it? If you've never been educated as to what happens next, then that's a futile process as well.
But that's the question, though. Look, a lot of the time we hear about the economy that's going to collapse. If we talk about, for example, we're big on land because everything is in the land. Everything. The bank is built on the land. And when we talk about redistribution, when we talk about restitution, when we talk about all of these, it's nice terms and whatever the case is. It's never been done because there's always this idea that the economy is going to fall. So the last conversation we had was the rand or the land. And why must the rand always be, we must fear the falling of the rand and not the fact that the land is still, the people that were dispossessed are still being dispossessed.
Yeah.
It's a continuation of that. So in terms of the economy being protected, we're also of the opinion that whose economy is being targeted, because you can't say that the people in KwaZulu-Natal, the people in Eastern Cape and Cape Flats and wherever else that are not participating in the economy, their economy is not going to fall, and this is the vast majority of South Africans. So when we talk about the economy is going to fall, what are we referring to when people talk outside? What is the view? Why are people protecting that so much? Or even, why are there not enough people from the white community that are coming out and saying, listen?
I think people that sit in comfort fear justice, right? That's the end goal. So, like you said, you used the example, people that don't have the means to farm, getting land, what are they going to do with the land? That's a very old way of looking at the redistribution policy. I've really I've tried to redefine what that means. And maybe it doesn't mean, taking away all the land and, the means of producing and whatever and giving it to someone else, but perhaps changing up the ownership and the profits. We could use that, let's say 20% or 30% in social programs or social nets. So perhaps we don't take the land and redistribute it physically, but we redistribute it as safety nets and as, like I said, the means of production, factories and so forth. So I think, like you said, it's very needed, but we need to rethink how we're going to execute on it. Because otherwise, other countries look at what's happening investor-wise in South Africa, and when they see the potential of taking away land, that rings red alarms in their head. They don't want to invest in a country where their new warehouse could suddenly be taken away from the government. But let's say now, let's rethink it. Let's say we do not allow foreign companies to come into South Africa and do business here unless they're willing to give 40 or 50% of their value, their land, to the rights of the people and share that, right? So you don't have to give us the land on which your factory stands, but we want to share the profits in that factory to people across South Africa because they deserve it's their land.
But there's been such a big systematic deconstruction of the and the reason I asked the question earlier of the colored mind or the brown mind and the black mind, because to piggyback on the previous statement that you made about the white mentality, it wasn't just about the land, it was actually about the mentality that superiority like we have. And what happened was the opposite of that coin is also true, where you find a lot of brown people and black people that still believe that white is right and white is better, and if the white person does, it's going to work, but then if we do it, it's not going to work. And so that mindset has also been ingrained and engraved into the hearts and minds of a lot of black and brown people, to say that if you're going to do this, you're going to mess it up. Let the white guy do it. He knows what he's doing. And that's still an issue up until today. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because even if you say, okay, let's redistribute some stuff, or there's still not going to be the education for our people. I'm saying our people as brown and black people to know what to do with the thing. Even if you do say, okay, bro, yeah, all of a sudden you get 50% or 30%, and now you start seeing the wealth coming in. Now you don't know what to do with all that money, and you've never been educated. You don't have financial literacy. Now, that could also be detrimental to the people.
And I'm going to use the example. The same thing kind of happened at the end of colonialization. A lot of these Western countries went back to Europe after colonization, and they left Africans with these Western types of governments and types of rule and stuff. And Africans have stick to that type of government, Western type of government and philosophy and politics. Whereas that's why I said earlier, it's very important that we bring every type of South African, whether black, Indian, colored, whatever, we bring them together. We talk about this, we dialogue about this, so that we can hear different opinions and we can educate each other. Because if we don't talk about it, we'll never have the means of having future discussions on this topic. And that's very important, education.
I think, a lot of that has been done. I think government has tried to host meetings or conventions or conferences. I've been to many of them where they try and do those things, but I feel like they've all been symbolic. The biggest challenge I feel we have in South Africa right now is the law. And they say we have the best constitution in the world, but we believe it protects white property, especially if you look at our Section 25 of the Constitution, which deals with property rights, right? So what is your view then in terms of, we still function with Roman Dutch law? That is the means on which we operate from a legal system, right? In terms of re-Africanizing the law, how do you view African law as if that had to become the law of the day, that the law that we function with is African law and not Roman Dutch law?
Yeah, see, I think that if we can redefine what African law is, right? The people in South Africa are some of the most brilliant people in the world. If we were to totally redefine government, I think that would be successful. But what we need now is we need something completely opposite of what we have now. Like you said, Roman Dutch, we're still based in that system. So we need to transform that into something completely different, and then we can call that the new African law, and it could be powerful. I thought about something a few days ago. As things start to change in the world, just imagine what a southern part of Africa, like a united Southern Africa, could do to a superpower like the United States. It could be more potential than South Africa's, but we're not there yet. We've not fixed internal problems between white people and colored people, or black people and colored people. So I think we still have a long way to go. But what we're doing, that's a good start. It just has to happen on a larger scale, and it shouldn't be just organized by government, because that's when it's going to fail. It should be organized by the people as an educational revolution.
Do you find that school integration helped in that regard? The fact that you now can go. When my parents could afford me to take me to a private school, it was the first time I went to school now. There's white people. I was the only colored guy in my class. But now, again, it was uncomfortable for me as well, because now I'm like, okay, now I'm in a completely different world. Now I'm not sure how to behave. I'm not sure, and then it points out a lot of insecurities in you as an individual also, because you're like, okay, maybe, so now I need to assimilate to this guy's culture, or to this, and it actually brings out a lot of insecurities in you as an individual as well, because you're not sure how to behave, you're not sure what to do. But then obviously in high school, then you got this mixed group of you got white colored, black, Indian. Everyone's in the same class. We all have the same studies, the same subjects, the same everything, the same teachers. And then you get to integrate with one another, and you get to know one another, you get to go to one another's houses, get to meet one another's parents, that kind of stuff. Do you think it assisted in that regard?
Absolutely. I think it has played a huge role in, expanding what we know about one another. But I do think that it's still largely been very limited, right? South Africa is still one of the most divided nations on earth, whether we talk about financially or culturally or opinionated or whatever, we're divided. We can't stand together on the most basic of things. That's why I advocate for land redistribution and restitution and so forth, because I believe that when we empower people who's been previously disadvantaged, we are empowering ourselves. So when I empower my black brothers and sisters and we help lift them out of poverty, you create a space where they can compete in the economy the same way you do, and that's good for the economy. So why, advocate for keeping wealth in the hands of whites? And because let me say this very clearly, apartheid never ended. It evolved. It transformed into something more, like you said earlier. It's not the white minority government anymore, but it's the banks. Banks own your house. This sector of the government does this, and you're not allowed to do this. So, apartheid didn't end. It evolved to accommodate the same people, just in different ways.
Countries, in terms of areas now like Orania, what is your view on something like that?
Treason,
state,
basically.
Orania.
Yeah, treason. Yeah.
Okay, then what is your view on Zululand? The Ngonyama Trust with the Zululand, because it's also a cultural group that owns
so
it.
I've always been against this populist tribal identity. I made a video yesterday where I spoke, we've abandoned meaning for identity. I want to be a white man, I want to have my white community. I want to be a Zulu man, and I want to have my Zulu kingdom. Like you said, it's since the dispensation, we should have really redefined what South African culture is. We shouldn't be Zulus and Afrikaners anymore. We should be South Africans. And I think that is a big problem. I'm not saying abandon culture. I'm not saying, don't remember where you come from. But I'm saying we need to redefine what South African culture is and leave behind this nationalist white agenda and tribal notions, because that's just driving us apart further.
How do you then think of, for example, I feel like South Africa is a failed state because the languages in which people get taught is not in their indigenous languages. So if we had to have a melting pot of all these different ethnic groups, cultural groups, and people are not distinct, like you find in Europe, where Germany is for Germans, or not is for Germans, but you find German is the predominant language in Germany, Italian in Italy, and so forth, and it works. And it's not to say that no one else is welcome, but there's a particular culture that is practiced in Germany because German people live there, right? And the same thing you find in South Africa. When you go to KwaZulu-Natal, you find a particular group of people living there, particular culture that is being practiced. Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, Western Cape, everywhere it's distinct, right? So my question is, why is that altogether such a bad idea if it works, number one, in Europe, and Europe came to divide Africa and say everyone in one pot, and now we are not defined by ethnic groups, we are defined by being South African. And in the long run, I can speak on that because the Khoisan history has been removed by the very same tactics. I call it tactics. So how do we then achieve the same goal in protecting our culture, protecting our history, protecting our language, having Afrikaans universities, having a Zulu university, having a Xhosa university, whatever the case may be, if we just have this idea that, look, we are all South Africans and move forward.
Yeah. See, this thing about Afrikaans universities and English universities and Zulu universities, I'm totally against that. I don't believe we as Afrikaners should go build an Afrikaans university. That creates distinctions. What we should do is we should create as many universities as possible, educate as many lecturers and professors as we can in as many home languages as we can, and provide people, right? Because when you have an Afrikaans university in, let's say, Pretoria, there's a lot of Afrikaans people across South Africa that can't get access to that Afrikaans university. Same way with the Zulu University in KZN. There's a lot of Zulu people throughout South Africa that would love to go to that Zulu school, but can't because it's in KZN. So why not create nice universities that accommodate South Africans, whether you speak Afrikaans or English?
The most powerful thing in South Africa, when you go to KZN, you know you are entering a Zulu territory. And they are unapologetic about it. And I feel like there's nothing wrong with it because they are protecting their history, their culture, their language, everything about being Zulu. Just like you will find anywhere else you go into the world, because the world doesn't practice I am the world culture. You go to, when you travel, you're going to Germany, you're going to Italy, you're going to Portugal, you're going to Russia, and you're going to find those cultures
But there is
practiced
different distinctions, right? So we need to accommodate people. So like you said, Zulu, KZN. What about, the Nazis and Nazi Germany? Adolf Hitler believed that he was doing the work of God. He believed that he was creating this unified race in Germany. He believed it was the right thing to do. He wanted to unify the Germans. Did he do it the right thing? As you are, saying that Zulus deserve. And I'm not saying we need to destroy language and culture. That has to be essential as historical learning points and culture and so forth. We don't need to destroy Zulu universities and things like that. But what we need to do is we need to start moving away from distinctions. Because and I'll always advocate for this, because as long as I'm a white man and you're a colored man and we're not South African, we'll fight amongst each other. But once we sit here and we talk as South Africans and as brothers and sisters in a shared type of struggle, which a lot of white people don't see yet, but hopefully they will, I think we can make a difference.
Here's my thing. Sorry, Zakes. Here's my thing, though, and I really want to also say this. We're not saying, because I advocate for the opposite of what you're saying. I believe that there should be a Zulu school that teaches Zulu, all the subjects in Zulu, in KZN. At least there's a province that is predominantly Zulu. Focus on doing that there. And as opposed to putting a Zulu school in the Northern Cape, where they're not really Zulu people. I'm just making examples. So So in terms of protecting that, there's no way that you can, in one school, because you can have different teachers in the school. It's impossible, it's impractical. I said it earlier. But if you
it's impossible.
Maths in Nama or Maths in English or whatever the case may be, so that doesn't in any way, I feel like, advocate for apartheid or whatever the case. It's the objective behind something like that would always be preserving the language, the culture, the history.
So what is your point on Urania then? That's their stance. They want to do that.
I'm saying there's nothing wrong. That is actually a good thing. But the fact, it's how people articulate. And I'm not saying maybe what they stand for or those things are bad or good. What I'm saying is the concept of having a particular place that focuses on practicing a particular culture, like you go to Germany or Lesotho or Swaziland or anywhere else, is that area is focused on a particular culture because that's predominantly the people that live there. So, and even there are tribal leaders in these different areas that are not getting recognition from government, and everyone has now become westernized because that's what we believe is the way the world must be. So, Western.
Do you think people in Urania are generally welcoming of non?
I'm not.
Do you think they're racist people? Do you think the people in Urania?
Yes, I do think.
Do you think they're mainly racist?
Yes.
So, do you think taking people, putting them together, totally isolating them from the rest of the world, you as an educated man, you think that would be the right thing to do, in creating unity.
Yes, I do think
Okay.
that is. Let me ask you a question. Do you then think it is a bad thing when you go to KZN, when you go that they're practicing racism when you go
Well,
to that?
I've having kingdoms that has been extinct in Africa for thousands of years is culturally is a totally different argument.
Has the Zulus been extinct ever?
No, I'm not talking
Oh.
about extinct, a distinct
Yeah.
culture in Africa for thousands of years. Europeans and Urania, what they're doing there, it's totally out of the vision of South Africa because they want to create their own thing. Zulu and Zuludom is part of being South Africa. It's a South African culture, right? So having Zulu universities and schools and stuff is totally different than wanting to create a unified Zulu nation in KZN, which is going to isolate the Zulu people from the rest of South Africa. Because let's be honest, there are many more cultural groups except the Zulus. It's not just Zulus.
Do you find the Zulus in other places other than KZN in South Africa?
Yes.
They have a homeland, is what they call a homeland. But it doesn't mean that they're not welcome anywhere else in South Africa. Yet they practice that thing. When you go to the Zulu land, the king rules on Zulu land, not anybody else.
Yeah,
But
that's
even that Zulu land, was that not previously Khoi land either?
Yes, all of
'Cause
them.
they find
all
rock
of,
art
all
still
of
there.
Southern Africa is Khoi land. But we know it's impractical to get all the land back physically. So what we're saying is there are particular people, a group of people that are living on a particular piece of land in South Africa that practice a particular culture, and that there is absolutely nothing wrong with advocating for that to be the primary culture, the primary language of that area. You understand? And I don't feel like this is a disadvantage to anyone, because if you, and I'm saying again, and I'm using Europe, if you go to Europe, you're going to go the streets and everything are in German or whatever. I'm always using German. I don't know why, because maybe the Nazis. But as an example, when you go there, everything is written in German. So, and you're not going to feel like, oh, I feel uncomfortable here, because you know you're going to a German country.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean in any way, because the things are written in German, that you're not welcome in Germany. You understand what I'm saying? So in South Africa, why South Africa, the only place in the world that we want to have this kind of idea that this is a melting pot and it works? Did it work for the last 30 years?
No, South Africa is a failed state for the
And
last
you
30
mentioned
years.
the last time about the vision of South, that Orania doesn't fit into the vision of South Africa like the Zulu kingdom fits into. What is the vision of
So
South
that's what I
Africa?
want to ask you. If we allow Urania to claim self-cultural preservation in their attempt to do whatever they do, we have to allow the Zulus to do it. We have to allow the Ndebele's to do it. We have to allow everyone to do it. And at what point do these people not say, we want to break free from South Africa, we want to create our own thing? What happens when Urania says they want to break free, they want to create their own Afrikaans kingdom within South Africa? What do we say? We can't say, well, you can't because it's not your right. We've given them the right to self-determination and cultural
You see, it becomes a
preservation.
slippery slope.
How is it slippery?
I understand both of your viewpoints, because your argument that you're making is if you go to a European country, they exercise that language, that culture, and it's fine, it's accepted. But now again, where the challenge comes in, that's seen as a country as a whole. So Germany is Germany, and then France is France. And
When you go to Germany, you experience Germany, right? And you experience German culture. You don't experience, because there's very many different types of German cultural heritages. There's not one type of German, right? Just like there's not one type of Nguni group, but you experience German. Even though in certain parts you'll experience different types of German. I'm not calling for South Africa to be wiped of all its cultures and languages and stuff. I'm just saying that as long as we use these distinctions and we allow Urania to do the same,
It
other
creates division.
people will do the same. It creates more division, and at the end of the day, we're going to be in a hotter pot than we were pre-94.
Here's a question to that. All right. I'm not saying, let me first make a statement. I'm not saying that only Oranians, whatever they call themselves in Orania, can live in Orania. That a black person can't stay there, a brown person.
but they saying that.
No, that's what I'm saying. When they asked me, are they racist? I said, yes, they're racist based on that ideology. But the concept of that is not wrong, because it is being practiced in a way. It's just not formally acknowledged. and they are not being given the resources to establish in Limpopo the language that they speak there. That is what they are going to prioritize as the primary language, so that when you go there, you know I'm walking into this kind of cultural practice. And it's not to say that I can't live in Limpopo or I can't live in KZN. I can't.
But then
live
you
in
must
Oranje.
assimilate to that culture.
Even though you don't want to necessarily, right?
No, you're not. When you go, this is why I use German, because they want colonized. Their languages, their history, and everything wasn't erased like it happened in South Africa. So these things are still intact. Everything in Germany, in Europe, is still intact the way it was before, right? When they came to South Africa, we never created the border to say now this space here is South Africa, but people were still distinctly practicing their cultures. So the white man came from abroad and said, listen here, now in terms of this whole project, everything that happened from colonization all the way up to now, this is the only way that's going to work. That's a false agenda, and I feel like that's how they're using to drown people's history. They're drowning their identity, because now everyone must be urbanized. You mustn't see yourself as a Zulu person, you must see yourself as a South African. That is what is being, the agenda that is being pushed. And I feel like it is a wrong agenda, because how are people going to, 100 years down the line, have any of their cultural practices in place, their languages in place? When are you going to have Zulu textbooks? And I'm using Zulu, and maybe the Zulu people have it, but other communities who are minorities within the Nguni Bantu communities don't have such things. And should they be accorded those things? Yes, I believe so. And why is that wrong? Why must it be seen as racist and dividing and whatever the case may be? Why can it not be seen as progressive?
I think a case study for this has already been done with the Khoisan San. The Khoisan San's history has already been eradicated. It's already been assimilated into the minor, broader picture of South Africa. And I feel like that's probably where we ended up feeling displaced now, because now us as colored people, we're like, okay, bro, we were all shoved into these like colored areas. And okay, you must make peace with it, and you must figure it out. Put your whole family with you guys are 5, 6 in the family. You all go into a flat there with 1 bedroom. You must figure it out, and it's up to you how you're gonna get out of it. And then that struggle over the years of having to figure out, how am I gonna get out of this? And it takes your grandparents to move. Okay, at least I moved back out of the lokasie. And then your parents are like, yes, okay, we have enough now to move to the suburbs. Now you, the next one, like, okay, right, now I need to start a business. Whereas the white person already had businesses from 5 generations ago. It's like, yeah, bro, I just take over my father's company. It makes annual return of X. And so that's where, so I'm saying the case study has been done. We're the examples that what happens when you break someone's whole thing. And now in 2025, I'm trying to figure out, okay, now who's my grandfather? Okay, now who's my great-grandfather? Why did they burn all those things? Remember, they burnt all our documentation. Yes. It was like, so now what? And it leaves you an orphan. And it leaves you with the residue of trying to figure out, where do I belong? Who am I? And in essence, it affects your self-worth and your
so, may I come in there? I that's why I've argued this. I think identity politics really have ruined the left. We've lost the world in identity politics. We want to be this, we want to be this, we want to be this. We seek internal meaning instead of external meaning. So we have to realize that whenever we find something from within, it's always going to be subjective. It's never going to be objective. Only something you find externally might actually be objective. So just to come back to this point, right? The colored community has been disgraced by losing a lot of their culture and identity through colonialization, through apartheid, and through the injustices of the past. And colored people really need to create that meaning again, right? But I'm not saying we need to take away the opportunities for colored people to build that, or for Zulu people to build on their culture, or for white people to build. I'll always be Afrikaans, right? A Zulu person will always be Zulu, even though they're South African. But I think moving forward, we're in 2025, we're not in Nazi Germany anymore. When are we going to move away from white and black to South Africans against the United States, or South Africans against the world? We can't stand together, and one day we probably want to stand together as one human race and try and make peace on earth and a better future for all people on earth. How are we going to do that if in 2025 we still distinct each other or make distinctions based on race and culture? When are we going to start moving away from I'm Dutch and rather I'm human? Right?
I think the idea was what was the phrase? Unity in diversity. But then the diversity is causing division. Division. Because now because both of your points are valid. What you're saying is valid and what you're saying is valid, because you're saying that if we're going to continue to separate ourselves, then we're not going to ever stand together. And you're saying, yeah, but if we're just going to melt all together, then now I'm at the cost of my
How is it unity
history.
in diversity if we're all just one? If we're all just South African, then how are we diverse?
But both needs to be true. You have to be diverse and you have to be united.
Yes, but diverse doesn't mean we are not united.
But that's
Diverse
what the problem is
But
now. Diverse means we're
it's
not
very
united.
true what he says. But you cannot be united unless you're diverse. So you can't be a united people in Urania because you're not united. So you're not living up to what South African potential really could be. Because as long as we keep fighting each other here, the superpowers are going to walk all over us. We really don't.
But that's divide and rule. That was the whole point of divide and rule.
You spoke
Make them
about-
fight so that we can take whatever.
You spoke about a United States. Let's call it a United States of Southern Africa. The very concept of that speaks to what I was referring to, because when you go to these other areas beyond the borders of South Africa, you're going to find that their laws are different. Number one, right now. Although this is all Africa, it's all our land, but if you want to forge different states and call it a United States of whatever, it's going to be different cultural practices. When you go there right now, they celebrate what they practice as Botswana, as Zimbabwe, as Mozambique, or whatever the country is. So I honestly don't see how there is a bad thing. I do think that we need to deal with racism. And racism is something that we've never dealt with properly. It's always going to be there because of the inequality that still exists, right? So if we also, everyone is a South African and I'm not Khoisan, you're not an Afrikaner, he is not a Zulu, you're not a Khoisan, or whatever the case may be, then how are we going to address the injustices of the past?
Yeah, but
if
that's not what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, if we are all we remove identity politics, where we can say, listen, I am a Khoisan, I want to preserve my language, I want to practice Khoisan in this particular space, not because I'm racist to someone else, but because that is where we are predominantly, you find us, you understand, as a people's group. And how do you then, if we do not know each other by...
that's what I'm saying. You're placing meaning on internal value, races, language, culture. What I'm saying is, I'm not talking about internal value. What I'm saying is, let these things play out. Race, culture, language, that's fine. We need to find that external value. So even though we are all different colors and cultures and languages and all of that, we need to find that external meaning, whether that be, for example, overriding a larger world country and becoming better than they are, or giving them a little bit of pressure and not having them tell us what to do. That is meaning. That is what we need to find. We need to stop looking inside ourselves and trying to fight over small things like, you know what, I'm white and I'm black and we need to fight over this. We need to find a common purpose, like a meaning.
But I think where the challenge then comes in is there's still not equality amongst us as individuals. I'm still suffering and you're still doing better than me. So that creates the division as well. Because I think innately we all want unity. If you look at when the Springboks play, it's, we go to the fan parks. When South Africa was hosting the World Cup, it was the best feeling in the world. It was like, yo, bro, we here. This is our place. This is our thing that we do. We're welcoming the world into our space. There was this camaraderie amongst all South Africans, right? Yeah. When you were walking back from the stadium, the white guy and the black guys jumping on each other, they praying together. The point I'm making is that innately we all want this thing to work. When you look at when Springboks play and we go to a fan park, we went to the one in by Monte Casino, and we're standing there, right? we are all with South African t-shirts, all Springbok
That's what I'm
t-shirts, all
talking
South
about,
African
external
caps
meaning.
with flags and things. Bro, we jumping on each other. Yeah! It's like we all want for this thing to work. But then behind the scenes, it must also work. It mustn't be like, yes, we stand together here, but here at the back, you know, I'm kniping you here because I'm going to take your house away because I can see you can't afford this thing. In the meantime, I can afford, I'm the owner of the bank. So then there's that.
Look, more than that, more than celebrating those things, which I think is very good. I've never advocated against having unity, you know, not treating someone based on the fact that he's an Afrikaner, so I treat him with a particular attitude or whatever the case may be. What I'm saying is the preservation and the protection of culture and language must always be paramount. We cannot replace that with a one world system, because that system replaces the fact that we are different in nature, that we practice different cultures.
But we are not different in nature.
No, in culture. Okay, let me rephrase what I'm saying. We practice different cultures, right? Our languages are different. With what we do, things that we do, there's a lot of things that are different about us, but it doesn't make me better than you or you better than me. Difference doesn't mean one is better than the other.
A lot of people
Why
look
can
at it like that.
Why? Yeah, but then that's their problem. That's because those are the very people that want to cause division. Why can we not celebrate being different?
Yeah, I never celebrate being, you know, different, because we're not different, we're human. I celebrate doing things differently.
But then why do you identify as an Afrikaner? You say, I'm always going to be an Afrikaner.
That's genetically and historically what my DNA and what the facts say.
So are we genetically different?
I don't identify, I don't go around saying to people, I'm an Afrikaner. I'm proud of being Afrikaans. I'm proud of being a South African and fighting for a South African cause. I don't go around saying I'm an Afrikaner.
Okay.
I believe in something, you know, much more unit than that.
Even when you say you're South African and there's Zimbabwe on the next country, right? Earlier you mentioned that we are all human. We can't deny the fact that we are all human. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. At some point, you're going to cross a border where that's going to be Zimbabwe. Or if you go to another continent, that's going to be Europe, where there is going to be differences. You understand what I'm saying? So at some point, that is a reality. And it does not make one better than the other. It's just the fact that cultures are different, languages are different. There's a lot of differences between us. But the one thing that we do share is humanity. And that, I mean, we're trying to replace the one with the other, which I feel like shouldn't be the case. There should be a balance between the two. Understanding that I am a human being, you're a human being, but you practice Afrikaans culture, I practice Khoisan culture, you practice Zulu culture.
And tell me, just a general question, is Christianity Khoisan culture?
Christianity.
Is that what you base your Khoisan culture on?
Me.
Yes. Christianity. You don't see that. You see that do you see that as colored culture?
Yes, I do see that.
Even though it's European dominated.
Well, it's the truth. So I always say this, and I'll say this now. I'm a Christian before I'm a Khoisan, even though I advocate for Khoisan and all of these things. But the first thing is my maker. I know who my maker is. So I'm a Christian. I practice Christian culture. And it's not to say that that is European culture. It is the truth. You understand what I'm saying?
So your subjective truth, right?
No, it's the truth.
No, it's your truth. Because it's not the truth. It's your truth.
Okay, what is the truth?
We don't know what the truth is, right? So what I'm saying is you can't...
So how do you say something is not the truth if you don't know what the truth is?
No, you're claiming something, so you have to prove it. I don't have to prove something I'm not claiming. You're claiming that there's you find divine purpose in your religion. I'm asking you, is your religion Western dominated and inspired, or is it culturally relevant to colored people? That's what I'm asking you.
Let me answer your question. Right, number one, and I'm going to say this for the sake that I am a Christian and there's a question that has been posed. Right, in the beginning, the first human being was Adam, and we believe humanity started right here, right? In South Africa, what we call South Africa, right? And if there was a prophecy that was spoken in the beginning with the first man, that same prophecy was carried out. However, it came to completion through the Jewish people and whatever happened along the line, it came to fruition, that same prophecy. So we believe all of that. So we believe in that God, that same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the same God that we had in the beginning.
Even though historically, That's not true, what you just said, because historically, Khoi and San people practiced African spirituality, not Christianity.
No,
No, that's the truth.
when did Christianity start?
Christianity
Christianity
started-
wasn't in the beginning. Now we're having a Christian debate, but it's fine. Christianity wasn't in the
No,
beginning.
it's not a Christian debate. I'm just trying to have you, agree with me that Europeans brought Christianity to Khoi and San. And here's the very important point. They couldn't keep Khoi and San as slaves unless they were not Christian. If they were Christian, they could not keep them as slaves. Is that true or not?
No, that is
No,
not
that's
true.
that's true. You can Google it actually.
No.
It's a historical fact. So
That is being subjective. I can say the same thing. You see, everyone in South Africa wears clothes and T-shirts and drives a car, but those cars come from the West as well. But does that in any way make suppress the culture that is existing in South Africa? Are we supposed to say, because this is Western, that I can't do it, I can't drive a car because it was inspired by Europeans? No, it's progressive. There are certain things that we need to understand and draw a line between
Yes, but
what suppresses us and what improves our lives.
but you acknowledge that you've lost your cultural identity. I'm
No,
telling
that
you.
is not our culture. You are now telling me what my culture.
I'm telling you that no, that's a historical fact. You can look it up whilst we have the debate. Christianity was originated around 2,000 years ago
Yes.
in the Middle East by brown people, not colored people. It was Middle Eastern people, and it came here to Africa before colonialization. But it was a very minority religion in certain parts like Ethiopia. When colonizers came, they forced Christianity onto Khoi and San people, right? And it's been like that. It was like that for 100, 200 years. And in that process, I believe, and you don't have to take my word for this, Khoi and San people lost their African spirituality.
Do you believe we are the Khoi and the San are the first people of the world?
I believe that Khoi and San are genetically one of the oldest people on earth.
Okay. Could it be possible then? Let's put it this: could it be possible that the Khoi and San are the oldest people in the world?
So you want to...
No, I want to get to a point.
are the oldest people? Yes, some of them.
All right. Then, do you believe that there was one man in the beginning of time, that God created Adam? Do you believe that?
No.
So, what do you believe it looked like in the beginning? There was many people.
No, I can't claim what it looks like. I wasn't there to claim that. And anyone who claims to know what happened when they were not there is either a fool or is lying. So I'll tell you that I don't know. But to assert that some man with a beard in the sky did it is illogical for a person of the 21st century, right? Okay. I'm not going to claim that I do know, because I don't have the facts to show you. But what I will tell you is that when we look at the history and so forth, a lot of tribes, a lot of cultures in Africa practiced a same kind of, spirituality in South Africa. It's well documented, because it's even well documented that San and Khoi's people didn't actually use violence against their children, just like that's documented. So
the point that this, remember what you stated earlier is Christianity, which derives from Jesus, right, in the Middle East, Jerusalem, that area, is 2,000 years ago, plus minus, right? The Khoisan have been existing here for over 200,000 years. That is also documented in terms of science, the studies that have been done by experts.
Modern humans.
Yeah. So if you go back and you see where 2,000 years sits compared to how long we've been living here, and that also the science that says that humans migrated from here and went to the rest of the world, that somewhere along the line there is a commonality. So if we believe as Christians, we don't just believe that life started when Jesus died on the cross, right? We believe from where it started with the prophecy and everything that happened. So all of these things that were practiced over time, we understand when Christianity started, and that there was also a process before that. And that process, you can't tell me that the same thing that we believe in. I disagree with people if they say that there was another God or whatever the case is. And maybe, like you're saying, that will be subjective. I don't want us to go too far too deep into the conversation and move away from what we were discussing. The point I'm trying to just make to you is that we believe in Jesus, whether it came from Europe or not. We believe it as the truth. We don't believe
even if that means destroying your own culture. Yes or no?
We don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. You can See, the only way for you to...
It has destroyed European culture.
It hasn't destroyed our culture.
It has
I can't
destroyed
say it.
European culture. It has.
If you go, let me say this. If you go, I sit with all the Khoisan leaders that are in different parts of South Africa, right? If you go and you ask these people, right, what are their cultural or religious practices, they're going to tell you Christianity, right? And if you ask them, has this thing destroyed your culture? What do you think the answer is going to be? Yes,
No,
it's
it's
destroyed.
going to be no.
It hasn't destroyed. We feel like we're better people
Yes,
because of that.
Because the best way to keep a prisoner imprisoned is to have him believe he's not a prisoner. The fact remains, right? You can still remain a Christian and believe in God
100%.
whilst acknowledging that Christianity was brought to Khoisan people by Europeans. Was it or was it not?
Christianity.
Yes.
That is true. I'm not denying that all of that has happened. Look, I hope I'm answering your question when I tell you that there's a story behind, there was a prophecy that went out in the beginning, and I'm saying that for the purposes of the fact that it was brought up. There's a story behind Jesus and how he came. And all of that had to happen the way it happened. I'm talking about Jesus coming to being. And whatever happened beyond that, there was a lot of injustices that happened. But to say that Christianity is bad because a European gave it to me with the intention of erasing my history and everything, that's amper vloekek.
Okay, gents, we over our time now. And we actually veered off into a different theological conversation now. And I didn't want to get into it. I could have, but I didn't want to because it was going away from the point. Well, not necessarily, but it was kind of going into a new conversation. But, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pieter, dankie, Omat.
Thank you.
Dankie, my gekomen. It was an interesting conversation. And I think, I think debate, conversation is always healthy. Respectfully always. And we got into it. I think closer to the end you guys were going for it. Yeah. But it's always healthy and it's always
healthy.
Yeah, it's always healthy.
No, it's
as long as it stays respectful, it's healthy.
I think that it's, like I said, it's important. And when we walk out here, there's no hard feeling. It's because we want to have this dialogue. It's not because we're indifferent. We're human and
that is correct.
We're the only species that look for logic, reasoning and debate. So that's what makes us unique. Thank you for that.
But thanks for coming. Closing remarks on your part.
Thank you.
Anything?
Closing remarks? Just thank you for having me. It was quite the experience.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. No, thanks. No, look, I think the conversation was good. I think we've established a couple of things, views. And like you're saying, views are always subjective. And sometimes we will substantiate our subjective view with facts or evidence or whatever the case may be. And look, I stand by what I said in terms of the one point that we really differed on was on whether South Africa should be, a melting pot or whether we should advance all these different languages by having a Zulu university. And I'm using universities as an example in KZN, in Cape Town, in these different areas where you can preserve language because everything, there's a lot, language carries a lot. It carries culture, it carries many different things with it. So if you really want to preserve a culture, a people, you preserve the language. And we've lost our language, and that's why I can say that, to a point that it was nearly extinct. So I will always advocate that it is good to have that, not in a way that we come across as racist. We don't even agree with racism because people carry on with the term and we use it for the sake of reference, but we don't believe in race. We believe race was something that was created by apartheid and colonization, and people were known by their culture. So how can we do away with the very culture that is what we were practicing before time? And outside of South Africa, people still practice culture. Only here in South Africa, the world goes that way, South Africa goes that way. So, but look, at the end of the day, the other points that we've spoken on was white privilege or privilege. Is that still relevant in South Africa? Is it still prevalent in South Africa? 100%, and I think we've agreed on that. And even ways we can deal with, dealing with white privilege, in the sense that, it creates or broadens the inequality margins. So 100%, I'm happy we could have the conversation. I hope it's not the last time, or debate towards the end. But yeah, thank you, Zakes.
Jens, thank you for coming. It was a good conversation.
What's your closing
Thank
remarks?
you. Now my closing remarks is just to thank everyone on the comment section. It's buzzing here in the comment section. It's happening here in the comment section. But thank you so much to everyone watching. For those of you gonna watch the show after it's live, I don't know if the comment section will still be up, but it's quite a lot going on there. But thank you so much for everyone watching. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming through. And have a good day.
Bye, donkey.
Cheers.
Imagine if you have your vision as the car with the right team. Imagine how quick that vision will come into the footsteps. Something that was taking 5 years, 3 months.
This morning is all about leadership and influence.